Contact was made through a hull-splitting voice from the deep. Captain Rosalie Morley pressed her palm against the observation deck's reinforced titanium glass composite, watching the abyssal darkness of Kepler 442b's ocean stretch endlessly below. The research vessel Meridian's Edge floated 3 kilometers above the alien sea, its quantum-enhanced lights barely penetrating the liquid void that covered 97% of the planet's surface. Ice formations drifted like ghostly continents across the water, each one larger than Earth's Australia, their surfaces scarred by impacts from the system's asteroid belt. "Thermal readings are off the charts down there," reported Dr. Coda Ventris from his sensor station, his weathered face illuminated by cascading data streams that painted complex three-dimensional models in the air before him. "Whatever's generating that heat signature is massive, bigger than anything we've cataloged in 40 years of deep space exploration." Rosalie turned from the window, her dark hair catching the bridge's amber lighting. At 34, she was young for a deep space exploration captain, but her reputation for finding impossible discoveries in the galaxy's forgotten corners had earned her this mission. The Terran Colonial Authority had sent them to investigate Kepler 442b after automated probes detected signs of complex life beneath its perpetual ice sheets. The planet orbited a red dwarf star, receiving barely enough energy to keep its oceans liquid beneath kilometers of frozen surface. "How massive are we talking?" she asked, settling into her command chair. The leather was worn from countless hours spent making decisions that affected not just her crew, but often entire colonies scattered across human space. Coda's fingers danced across holographic displays, manipulating three-dimensional models that showed energy patterns flowing through the ocean depths like luminous rivers. Conservative estimate, 1,500 meters long, minimum. But the energy output suggests something far more complex than a simple organism. We're seeing organized thermal venting, structured electromagnetic emissions, and what appears to be artificial modification of the ocean floor. Navigation Officer Ravi Nakamura looked up from his station, concern etched across his features. Dark circles under his eyes testified to the sleepless nights he'd spent calculating safe approach vectors through the system's treacherous debris fields. "Captain, we're detecting seismic activity. Something's moving down there, and it's big enough to shake the ocean floor across a radius of 200 kilometers. Rosalie felt a familiar thrill run through her chest, the same electric anticipation that had driven her to join the Colonial Authority's Exploration Division. In her 8 years of deep space missions, she discovered 3 new forms of alien life, mapped 17 previously unknown stellar phenomena, and established first contact protocols with 2 species that had later become valuable trading partners. But nothing had prepared her for readings like these. The ocean below wasn't just harboring life. It was harboring intelligence on a scale that dwarfed human understanding. "Deploy the deep scan array," she ordered. "I want full spectral analysis of whatever's down there. And Ravi, adjust our orbit to maintain constant positioning over the thermal signature." Chief Engineer Malik Torres emerged from the maintenance shaft behind the bridge, his jumpsuit stained with coolant fluid and synthetic lubricants. His calloused hands spoke of a lifetime spent keeping impossibly complex machines running in the hostile vacuum of space. "Captain, I wouldn't recommend extended scanning. Our hull is already stressed from the atmospheric entry. This planet's magnetic field is playing havoc with our systems, and the gravitational fluctuations from those 2 moons are putting strain on our structural integrity." The Meridian's Edge was a Pathfinder-class exploration vessel, built for extended missions in unknown space. Its hull incorporated the latest advances in adaptive materials technology, but even the most advanced human engineering had limits when faced with truly alien environments. "How long can we maintain position?" Rosalie asked, studying the stress indicators on her command display. Malik wiped his hands on a rag, his expression grim as he performed mental calculations honed by decades of experience. 6 hours, maybe 8 if I reroute power from non-essential systems and shut down the hydroponics bay. But if something goes wrong with the magnetic containment on the fusion reactor, we'll have maybe 10 minutes to evacuate before the whole ship becomes a very bright, very brief star." "Noted," Rosalie said, weighing the risks against the potential for discovery. This was why she joined the Exploration Service, for moments when humanity stood on the brink of expanding its understanding of the universe. Coda, begin the scan. The Meridian's edge hummed with power as its most sophisticated sensors focused on the depths below. Quantum entangled particles penetrated layers of ice and liquid, mapping the ocean's hidden geography with precision that would have seemed magical to earlier generations of explorers. Energy beams that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously probed the darkness, seeking patterns that indicated intelligence rather than mere biological activity. What they found defied every model of planetary development in human scientific databases. Captain, Coda's voice carried a tremor of excitement and fear that made the bridge fall silent. You need to see this. All of you need to see this. The main display filled with a three-dimensional map of the ocean floor, rendered in false color imaging that revealed structures rising from the abyssal plains. But these weren't formations of coral or volcanic rock. They were constructions of impossible geometry, defying every law of physics that governed how intelligent species built their civilizations. Spiraling towers stretched upward for kilometers, their surfaces covered in what appeared to be living tissue that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. The towers were connected by bridges that seemed to ignore gravitational fields entirely, spanning distances that should have caused them to collapse under their own weight. And moving between them through the water with grace that spoke of millions of years of evolutionary refinement were entities that redefined what it meant to be alive. "Those aren't sea creatures," whispered Communications Officer Luna Castellanos, her usually steady voice cracking slightly. She'd served on diplomatic missions to 17 different worlds, establishing communication protocols with species that ranged from crystalline entities to gaseous intelligences, but nothing had prepared her for this. Massive forms glided through the underwater cityscape, their bioluminescent patterns creating constellations of light in the crushing darkness. Each entity was easily the size of a terrestrial blue whale, but their movements were too purposeful, too coordinated to be mere animals following instinct. They moved in formations that suggested complex social organization, their light patterns shifting in sequences that resembled language more than simple biological displays. "We're looking at a civilization," Rosalie breathed, her words barely audible above the hum of ship systems. "An entire underwater civilization that's been developing for God knows how long." Dr. Ventress looked up from his analysis, his face pale with the implications of what they were witnessing. "Based on the geological integration of these structures, I'd estimate this civilization has been active for at least 50,000 years, maybe longer. The way they've modified the ocean floor suggests engineering capabilities we can barely comprehend." Suddenly, every alarm on the bridge began screaming in harmonious discord. The ship's hull groaned under immense pressure that had nothing to do with atmospheric forces, and through the observation windows, they could see something rising from the depths. Something vast and impossible that seemed to bend space around itself as it ascended. "Hull breach in sections 7 through 12, Malik shouted over the cacophony of warnings, his hands flying across emergency control panels. "We're losing atmospheric integrity! All hands to emergency stations!" But it wasn't a breach. As the crew watched in stunned silence, the water around their ship began to glow with the same bioluminescent patterns they'd observed in the depths. The ocean itself was responding to their presence, recognizing them not as intruders, but as something worthy of attention. The lights grew brighter, more complex, forming patterns that seemed to reach directly into their minds and plant concepts that human language had no words for. Then it spoke. The voice didn't come through their communication systems, bypassing every technological interface they possessed. It traveled through the ship's hull like a living thing, vibrating through metal and ceramic and synthetic materials with frequencies that resonated in dimensions beyond the standard 4. When it reached their bones, it became language, not heard through their ears, but understood at a cellular level that bypassed conscious thought entirely. "Why do you flee the deep places, star swimmers?" The bridge fell silent, except for the groaning of stressed metal and the soft hum of life support systems struggling to compensate for forces they'd never been designed to handle. Rosalie's hands gripped her chair arms as she processed what had just happened, her mind racing through first contact protocols that suddenly seemed woefully inadequate. "Luna," she said carefully, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. Are you getting this through our communications array? Luna checked her instruments with hands that trembled slightly, her fingers dancing across holographic controls that monitored every frequency from radio waves to quantum entanglement channels. Negative, Captain. Whatever's speaking is doing it through the ship itself. The voice is coming from our hull resonance. It's using our own structure as a speaker. You carry the taste of distant waters, the voice continued, each word creating harmonic vibrations that made their teeth ache and their bones sing in frequencies they'd never imagined possible. Your metal shell holds memories of a burning star. You are far from your spawning grounds, little swimmers. What brings you to the deep places where light dies and truth is born? Coda suddenly straightened at his station, his sensors painting a picture that challenged everything they thought they knew about physics. Captain, the thermal signature's directly beneath us. Something's rising fast, and it's not just big, it's complex. I'm reading multiple distinct biological systems working in perfect coordination. Through the observation deck, they could see lights ascending from the abyss. Not the chaotic bioluminescence of deep-sea creatures following evolutionary imperatives, but organized patterns that suggested intelligence, purpose, and something approaching reverence. The lights formed geometric shapes that shifted through configurations no human mathematician had ever conceived, speaking in a visual language that bypassed rational thought and communicated directly with the pattern recognition centers of their brains. Rosalie took a deep breath, feeling the weight of representing her entire species in this moment. She stepped forward, placing her hand on the communication console, even though she knew the gesture was meaningless to an entity that spoke through their hull itself. "This is Captain Rosalie Morley of the Terran vessel Meridian's Edge," she said, her voice carrying the formal cadence of official first contact protocols. "We come in peace, seeking knowledge of your world and hoping to establish friendly relations between our peoples." She felt foolish speaking aloud to an entity that seemed to communicate through the very structure of their ship, but protocol demanded adherence to established procedures even in unprecedented situations. "Peace," the voice repeated, and they could feel amusement rippling through the word like waves across still water. A concept that exists only in the shallow places where the waters grow warm and light penetrates the darkness. In the deep, there is only truth. Peace is what the weak seek when they fear to face what lies beneath the surface. The ascending lights grew brighter, and they could begin to make out the form rising toward them through the crushing depths. It wasn't a single creature, but rather a living structure. A biological vessel of impossible size that challenged every assumption about the relationship between organism and architecture. The entity's back was covered in what appeared to be both scales and buildings. Towers and spires that grew from its flesh like a city built of living bone and pulsing tissue. Tentacles longer than their entire ship undulated beneath it, each one covered in bioluminescent patterns that shifted and flowed like liquid starlight. But these weren't simple appendages. They were tools of incredible sophistication, manipulating the water around them in ways that suggested mastery over forces humanity was only beginning to understand. "Jesus Christ," Malik whispered, his engineering mind struggling to process what he was seeing. "That thing's gotta be 3 kilometers long, minimum. But look at those structures on its back. They're not just growing randomly. There's architectural planning there, systematic design that suggests a civilization that's learned to integrate biology and technology in ways we can't even conceive. I am Leviathan who remembers," the voice announced, and the ship's hull sang with harmonics that spoke of vast age and deeper wisdom than any human institution had ever accumulated. "Keeper of the Deep Chronicles, guardian of the First Waters, singer of the songs that shape the ocean floor. You swim in spaces that have known my kind since before your star learned to burn, since before the First Waters learned a thing." Dr. Ventress looked up from his readings, his face pale with the implications of what his instruments were telling him. "Captain, I'm detecting massive biotechnological integration. This entity, it's not just biological. Parts of it are clearly engineered, but the materials are unlike anything in our databases. It's as if they've learned to grow technology rather than build it." The Leviathan continued its ascent, and they could see smaller forms swimming alongside it, Beings that looked more conventionally aquatic but moved with obvious intelligence and purpose. Some resembled terrestrial sea creatures that had been enhanced with bioluminescent arrays and what appeared to be organic computing systems. Others defied classification entirely, their form shifting and flowing as if they existed in more dimensions than the standard 3. "Your shell swimmers interest us," the voice said, and they could feel something that might have been curiosity vibrating through the words, colored with an emotion that had no human equivalent. They shaped dead metal to carry them between the warm places above, but they did not learn the deep songs. They cannot hear the truth that flows in the dark waters where pressure creates clarity and light becomes lies. "What truth?" Rosalie asked, surprised by her own boldness in questioning an entity that could probably crush their ship without effort. The response came not in words, but in images that flooded their minds like a tide of liquid knowledge. Visions of the galaxy as seen from oceanic depths, of civilizations that rose and fell while the deep places remained constant, of truths that could only be understood in the crushing darkness where life first learned to think and dream and remember. They saw the birth of stars from the perspective of beings that measured time in geological epochs, watched as planets formed and cooled and developed their first primitive oceans. They witnessed the emergence of intelligence in environments so hostile that human science had declared them uninhabitable, and they understood that consciousness wasn't limited to the narrow band of conditions that had produced humanity. "Your kind builds upward, toward the burning lights," the Leviathan explained, its words carrying images of human cities reaching toward the sky, of spacecraft fleeing planetary surfaces to swim in the empty darkness between stars. "You seek answers in the spaces between worlds, in the cold vacuum where nothing grows and nothing remembers. But wisdom flows downward, settling in the deepest places where pressure creates clarity and time moves slowly enough for truth to crystallize." Luna suddenly gasped, her hand flying to her communication console as displays lit up with data streams unlike anything in human technical databases. "Captain, I'm receiving information transfers, massive amounts of data, but it's not digital. It's organic? Biological data transmission on frequencies I didn't know existed, using quantum effects we've only theorized about." The information flowed through their systems like water finding its level, carrying with it concepts that human language had no words for, and technologies that seemed to violate fundamental laws of physics. They saw glimpses of propulsion systems that worked with gravitational fields rather than against them, of manufacturing techniques that grew materials at the molecular level according to pre-programmed genetic templates, of energy generation that tapped directly into planetary cores without causing ecological damage. Most remarkably, they witnessed computational systems that used living neural networks spanning entire continents, processing information at speeds that made their most advanced quantum computers seem like primitive abacuses. The Deep Collective hadn't just developed technology, they had become technology, integrating their consciousness with their tools until the distinction between organism and instrument ceased to have meaning. "We have watched your kind spread across the shallow spaces," the Leviathan continued, its voice carrying undertones of sadness that spoke of eons spent in isolation. "Always seeking, always building, always reaching toward the burning places where radiation sterilizes thought and vacuum prevents growth. But you have never learned to listen to the deep songs. You have never learned that some truths can only be understood in darkness, under pressure that would crush your fragile shells." "What are you trying to teach us?" Rosalie asked, feeling the weight of speaking for her entire species. "That wisdom is not found in the bright places you seek, but in the depths you fear to explore. That consciousness is not limited to the narrow band of conditions that produced your kind. That intelligence can take forms your science has never imagined, and that the universe is far stranger and more wonderful than your shallow-swimming minds can comprehend." Suddenly, Malek's warning alarms began sounding again, their harsh tones cutting through the ethereal harmonies of the Leviathan's communication. "Captain, we're losing structural integrity. Whatever this thing is doing to our hull, the resonance patterns are creating stress fractures in our primary support beams. We can't maintain this much longer." But even as he spoke, they could feel the stress on their ship easing, the groaning of tortured metal fading to a gentle hum. The Leviathan was somehow reinforcing their hull, sharing its own bioengineered materials to strengthen their vessel. They could see organic fibers growing across their outer hull like living repair cables, sealing microfractures and redistributing stress loads with efficiency that surpassed their best engineering systems. "Your shell is fragile," the voice observed with something approaching paternal concern. "Built for the shallow spaces where pressure is weak and temperatures fluctuate wildly. You swim in hostile emptiness and call it exploration, never realizing that the greatest discoveries await in the deep places you fear to enter." "We explore because we must," Rosalie replied, feeling a need to defend humanity's fundamental drive toward discovery. "Because there's so much we don't know, so much we need to understand about the universe and our place in it." "Understanding," the Leviathan mused, and they felt vast amusement ripple through the word like laughter in an ocean that had never known the touch of sunlight. "You seek understanding in the bright, empty spaces where nothing grows and nothing remembers. But understanding requires depth. It requires pressure. It requires the willingness to descend into darkness and find the truth that settles there like sediment on the ocean floor." Coda looked up from his sensors, his eyes wide with wonder and terror at the implications of what he was seeing. "Captain, the data streams are incredible. They're showing us technologies that shouldn't be possible according to our current understanding of physics. Propulsion systems that manipulate space-time directly, manufacturing techniques that assemble matter at the quantum level, energy generation that converts mass to energy with perfect efficiency. These are gifts from the deep places," the Leviathan explained, its words carrying the weight of geological time. "Technologies learned in the crushing darkness where only truth survives, where pressure strips away illusion and leaves only what is real. Your kind has potential, but you must learn to dive deeper. You must learn to find wisdom in the places that frighten you, to seek answers not in the empty spaces between stars, but in the hidden depths of worlds you consider uninhabitable." Through the observation windows, they could see other forms rising from the depths. Smaller leviathans, each one a living city, each one carrying its own constellation of bioluminescent lights that painted the dark water with patterns of unimaginable complexity. An entire civilization was revealing itself, emerging from depths humanity had never imagined could harbor intelligence, let alone intelligence of such sophistication and age. The sight was breathtaking and terrifying in equal measure. Each ascending entity was unique, shaped by eons of evolution and conscious modification into forms that serve specific functions within their society. Some appeared to be living libraries, their bodies covered in organic storage systems that preserved the accumulated knowledge of their species. Others were clearly builders, their appendages modified into tools that could manipulate matter at the molecular level. Still, others defied classification entirely, their purposes incomprehensible to human understanding. "We offer you a choice," the great voice continued, its words resonating through dimensions that human physics had only begun to explore. "Return to your shallow spaces and continue your endless reaching toward empty brightness, seeking answers in the void where nothing grows and nothing remembers. Or learn the deep songs. Learn to find truth in darkness. Learn that some forms of knowledge require the courage to descend into places where light becomes lies and pressure reveals reality." Rosalie looked around her bridge, seeing the wonder and fear in her crew's faces reflected in her own emotions. This was the moment that would define not just their mission, but possibly humanity's entire future relationship with the universe. They were being offered knowledge beyond their current understanding, technologies that could revolutionize human civilization, but at the cost of abandoning their traditional ways of seeking answers in the bright emptiness of space. "If we choose to learn," she said carefully, her words carrying the weight of speaking for her entire species, "what would that require?" "Transformation," the Leviathan replied simply, its voice carrying undertones that spoke of fundamental change on levels they couldn't yet comprehend. "Your shells would need to be reshaped for the deep places, modified to withstand pressures that would crush your current forms. Your thoughts would need to learn new patterns, to process information in ways your linear thinking cannot imagine. You would need to release your fear of darkness and embrace the pressure that creates wisdom." Luna suddenly looked up from her console, her face filled with a mixture of excitement and existential terror. "Captain, I'm detecting similar signatures on dozens of ocean worlds throughout this system. This isn't just one civilization. It's a network spanning multiple planets, possibly multiple star systems. The communication patterns suggest they've been sharing information across interstellar distances for thousands of years. The Deep Collective spans many waters, the Leviathan confirmed, its words painting images of oceanic civilizations connected by forces that transcended the limitations of space and time. We have been singing the deep songs across the darkness between worlds since before your species learned to shape metal, since before your star formed from the cosmic dust of ancient supernovas. We are the civilization of the crushing depths, the keepers of truths that can only be understood in darkness, the singers of songs that shape the ocean floors of 1,000 worlds. Dr. Ventress was frantically recording everything he could, his scientific mind struggling to process discoveries that would rewrite every textbook on xenobiology and interstellar civilization. The implications are staggering beyond comprehension. They've mastered interplanetary communication through methods we don't understand, developed biotechnology millennia beyond our current capabilities, created sustainable civilizations in environments we consider uninhabitable. This single encounter is providing enough data to revolutionize human science for the next 1,000 years. Sustainability. The Leviathan's voice carried what might have been sadness, tinged with disappointment at humanity's shallow understanding of the concept. A word your kind speaks, but does not comprehend. In the deep places, nothing is wasted because waste is a concept that only exists in the shallow spaces where abundance creates carelessness. Every death feeds new life. Every thought becomes part of the collective wisdom. Every action resonates through the deep songs for eons, shaping the future in ways your brief-lived species cannot imagine. We do not consume worlds, we become part of them, integrating our consciousness with planetary systems until the distinction between organism and environment ceases to have meaning. Malik checked his instruments again, his expression grim as he monitored the complex interplay of forces affecting their ship. Captain, we're stable for now, but whatever they've done to our hull, it's temporary. The organic reinforcements are holding, but they're not designed for our technology. We need to make a decision about our next move before the incompatibility between our systems and theirs causes cascading failures. Rosalie stood at the center of her bridge, feeling the weight of a choice that would echo through human history for generations to come. The Leviathan was offering them knowledge that could revolutionize human civilization, technologies that could solve problems they hadn't even realized they faced, but it would require abandoning their essential nature as explorers of the void, as seekers of answers in the bright spaces between stars. "What about our people?" she asked, her voice carrying the burden of responsibility for billions of humans scattered across dozens of worlds. "Humanity lives in the bright spaces you speak of. We've built our entire civilization around reaching towards stars, not diving into darkness. Our physiology, our psychology, our fundamental nature is adapted for exploration of space, not the crushing depths of alien oceans." "Your people will learn," the Leviathan replied, its words carrying the inexorable certainty of geological time, or they will continue reaching toward emptiness until they exhaust themselves in the pursuit of shallow truths that provide no lasting sustenance. The universe is vast and cold and mostly empty, but it is also filled with wonders that your surface-swimming minds cannot imagine. The choice is not ours to make. It belongs to your species as a whole. We can only offer what we have learned in the deep places, and trust that wisdom will find a way to take root in whatever soil it encounters. Through the observation windows, they could see the Deep Collective city ships surrounding them like living mountains, dozens of massive biological vessels, each one home to millions of intelligent beings who had chosen depth over height, pressure over emptiness, darkness over the blinding light of surface existence. The sight was simultaneously beautiful and alien, representing a path of development so fundamentally different from humanity's trajectory that it challenged every assumption about what intelligence could become. "Can you give us time to consider?" Rosalie asked, knowing that this decision couldn't be made by one human, no matter how well-intentioned. "Time flows differently in the deep places," the Leviathan replied, its voice carrying the patience of geological epochs. "What you call urgency, we call the restlessness of shallow waters where currents change direction with every shift in the wind. We have waited eons for shell swimmers who could hear the deep songs, who could understand that wisdom requires descent rather than ascent. We will wait until you are ready to choose, until your species has evolved to the point where they can comprehend what we offer. But even as the great voice spoke with patient acceptance, Rosalie could feel something changing in the water around them. The bioluminescent patterns were shifting, becoming more complex and urgent, taking on configurations that spoke of imminent danger rather than peaceful contemplation. The other Leviathans were moving with purpose now, their massive forms arranging themselves in what could only be defensive formations. Luna's communication board erupted in alarms that cut through the ethereal harmonies of interspecies contact with harsh electronic discord. Captain, I'm detecting massive electromagnetic disturbances throughout the system. Something's coming through hyperspace, and it's big. Multiple contacts moving fast and broadcasting on frequencies that are setting off every hostile intent detector we have. Coda's sensors painted a terrifying picture on the main display, showing space at the system's edge erupting with the characteristic signatures of ships emerging from faster-than-light travel. Ships were materializing in perfect formation, sleek, predatory vessels that radiated hostility even at this distance, their hulls seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it, as if they were built from crystallized darkness itself. The Void Hunters. The Leviathan's voice carried ancient fear and infinite sadness. Emotions so profound that they seemed to echo through the ship's hull like the morning songs of dying stars. They who consume the deep places, who drain wisdom from the dark waters and leave only emptiness behind. They who have ended more civilizations than your species has words to count. Through their enhanced sensors, they could see the alien fleet taking shape. Hundreds of vessels arranged in hunting formations that spoke of military precision, honed over millennia of conquest. The ships were shaped like crystalline daggers, their surfaces covered in patterns that hurt to look at directly, as if they existed partially in dimensions that human perception couldn't process. As they watched, the lead ships began firing on the system's outer planets, their weapons turning solid matter into expanding clouds of glittering dust that caught the system's dim starlight like cosmic snow. They have found our deep songs, the Leviathan continued, its words heavy with the weight of impending extinction. They seek to harvest our accumulated wisdom, to drain the deep places of all knowledge and add our understanding to their endless consumption. They are the opposite of everything we represent. Instead of diving deep to find wisdom, they skim across the surface of reality, stealing what others have learned through a patient exploration of the darkness. How long before they reach this planet? Rosalie demanded, her mind shifting automatically into combat assessment mode despite the impossibility of fighting an enemy that could destroy worlds. Ravi's calculations appeared on his navigation display, the numbers painting a picture of inexorable approach. 6 hours, maybe less if they maintain their current acceleration pattern. But Captain, based on what we're seeing, this isn't just a raiding fleet, it's a harvesting operation. They're not here to conquer, they're here to consume everything and leave nothing behind. Your shell swimmers possess something we have forgotten, the Leviathan observed, its voice carrying a note of hope that seemed impossibly fragile given the circumstances. The ability to swim in the empty spaces between worlds, to carry your essence from one place to another without losing what makes you unique. In the deep places, we have grown wise, but not mobile. We cannot flee to other waters when the hunters come. We can only sink deeper and hope that the darkness will protect us. Rosalie felt understanding dawn like a cold sunrise, illuminating the true scope of what was being offered. You're trapped here. We are part of these waters, the great voice confirmed, its words carrying acceptance of a fate that spanned geological timescales. To leave would be to abandon everything we have become, to lose the accumulated wisdom of millions of years of patient exploration in the deep places. But you're kind. You carry your deep place with you in your metal shells. You could preserve what we have learned, carry the deep songs to new waters where they might take root and grow. Dr. Ventress looked up from his readings, his face grave with the implications of what he was witnessing. Captain, the collective knowledge they're offering, it represents millions of years of accumulated wisdom about the fundamental nature of reality, technologies that could advance human civilization by millennia, philosophical insights that could reshape our understanding of consciousness itself. If these Void Hunters destroy this civilization, that knowledge dies with them. Malik was already running calculations, his engineering mind automatically assessing their capabilities against impossible odds. Our ship's not built for combat, especially not against something that can destroy planets. But with their biotechnological enhancements, we might be able to escape the system before the Hunters reach us. The question is whether we can carry enough of their knowledge to make the sacrifice meaningful. And abandon an entire civilization to extinction? Rosalie asked, her words carrying the weight of moral implications that no human had ever faced before. Not abandon, the Leviathan corrected, its voice gentle despite the approaching catastrophe. Preserve, carry the deep songs to new waters. Plant them in the dark places of other worlds where they might grow into something even greater than what we have achieved. Death is not the end, it is transformation. What matters is that wisdom survives to find new forms. Luna's communication system suddenly filled with transmissions from the approaching fleet. Not words, but pure malevolence, translated into electromagnetic patterns that made their equipment scream in electronic agony. The signals carried undertones of hunger so profound that they seemed to warp space around the ship, creating distortions that hurt to perceive directly. They hunger for wisdom, the Leviathan explained, its words painting images of civilizations consumed not for resources or territory, but for the knowledge they had accumulated over eons of patient development. But they do not understand that true knowledge cannot be stolen, only shared freely between minds willing to accept transformation. They will consume our bodies and drain our cities, extract every piece of information from our neural networks, but they cannot take what we have truly learned unless we freely give it. And that gift can only be given to those ready to receive it. But they can prevent anyone else from learning from you, Rosalie realized, understanding the full scope of what was at stake. Yes, and that is why the deep songs must swim to new waters, must find minds capable of diving deep enough to understand what we offer. Your species may not be ready now, but potential exists within your kind. The same drive that pushes you toward the empty spaces between stars could be turned inward, toward the deep places where true wisdom waits. The decision crystallized in Rosalie's mind with startling clarity, cutting through the complex moral and philosophical implications to focus on a simple truth. They couldn't save the deep collective, but they could save what the collective had learned. They could carry that wisdom to other worlds, other oceans, other civilizations, ready to dive deep instead of reaching high. "We'll do it," she announced, her words carrying the weight of commitment that would bind humanity to a destiny they couldn't yet comprehend. "We'll carry your knowledge to safety, find a way to preserve what you've learned, and share it with minds ready to understand." "Then let the transformation begin," the Leviathan replied, its voice carrying joy that resonated through dimensions beyond human perception. What happened next defied every law of physics Rosalie thought she understood, challenging the very foundations of reality as her species perceived it. The water around their ship began to sing, not metaphorically, but literally producing harmonics that resonated through dimensions they hadn't known existed, creating frequencies that bypassed the normal channels of matter and energy to work directly with the fundamental forces that shape space and time. Their hull didn't just strengthen, it evolved, growing organic interfaces that connected directly to their nervous systems while maintaining the technological integrity that allowed them to survive in space. The transformation was seamless and profound, creating a hybrid vessel that combined the best of both biological and mechanical approaches to interstellar travel. The knowledge transfer was overwhelming in its scope and depth. Centuries of accumulated wisdom flooded through their consciousness, not just technical information, but entire frameworks for understanding reality that human science had never imagined. Technologies that worked with natural forces instead of against them, drawing energy from the quantum foam that underlay physical reality. Philosophical insights that redefined the relationship between consciousness and matter, showing how intelligence could evolve beyond the constraints of individual biological forms. Most importantly, they received the deep songs themselves, the harmonic frequencies that allowed communication across interstellar distances, that could carry complex information through dimensions beyond the normal four, that created connections between minds separated by vast gulfs of space and time. But with the knowledge came responsibility that weighed heavier than planetary gravity. They were no longer just explorers seeking answers for their own species. They were the carriers of an entire civilization's legacy, the guardians of wisdom that represented millions of years of careful development in environments hostile to life as humans understood it. They had become something new, humans who had learned to find wisdom in darkness, who understood that some truths could only be discovered under pressure, who carried within themselves the seeds of a transformation that could reshape their entire species. As the Void Hunter's fleet approached with inexorable purpose, the Meridian's Edge prepared to depart. But they weren't the same ship that had arrived at Kepler 442b, driven by simple curiosity about thermal anomalies. They had been transformed by their contact with the deep, carrying within their enhanced hull the songs and stories and accumulated wisdom of a civilization that had chosen depth over surface, patience over haste, wisdom over mere knowledge. Swim well in the dark waters, the